It was supposed to be my last year in the Scouts, but it would turn out to be my last year for more reasons than just age. I had been in the Boy Scouts since I was 6. My parents thought I needed exercise, and they had been right. I was starting my career as a human couch potato early, and I'd come home from daycare and fall into the cushions as I watched cartoons by the fistful. I had started recording some of my favorites on the TiVo for later consumption by the time I was 5, and that was the summer my dad decided to make a change. My birthday is in June, and just after I turned 6, he took me down to the YMCA and signed me up for Boy Scouts. I wasn't terribly happy about it. I wanted to watch cartoons and kill time until I had to start school, but Dad insisted that it would be a lot of fun. You'll make friends and learn new skills, and you'll be part of something that you'll remember for the rest of your life. So I went along with it and agreed to try it out. I started at the bottom, Scout, and after a few meetings of less than enthusiastic participation, I made a friend. Jacob was in the same boat I was. His dad wanted him to get off the couch and out into the woods, and he was clearly phoning it in as well. He had the idea that we could sit next to each other, and maybe they wouldn't notice if we were just kind of getting by. So we did, and we started talking, and before long we were both having fun. Our knots got better, our crafts got less messy, and after a year and a half, which flew by, we advanced to tenderfoot. We were both pretty surprised, but the Scoutmaster told us how much improvement we'd made, and we both realized that we not only liked Scouts, but we liked being part of Scouts. We were working on our advancement to second-class Scout when a new kid joined, a kid who would make our duo a triple threat. Nick was already a second-class Scout, but he'd come from a different troop, and the Scoutmaster told him to take a seat at our table. Soon we were talking and laughing and having a blast in that way that kids with a new friend sometimes do. The 3 of us took second in the Pinewood Derby that year. Nick drove and we crewed, and our rocket went the highest at the science showcase. My couch potato days were well behind me now, and Dad said he couldn't be prouder of me. It was the summer of my 15th birthday, and I was looking forward to going to high school. It was bittersweet, too, because I had told my Scoutmaster that I'd be hanging up my uniform in the fall. By that point, Nick, Jacob, and I were all that was left of the original troop, and we were helping him with the younger Scouts. All 3 of us were Life Scouts, and I was a little bummed that I'd never make it to Eagle Scout. I didn't have to stop going. They let you stay until you're 18, but I felt that it was time. I was going to start working a part-time job soon, and to be honest, I was afraid of getting made fun of for still being in the Boy Scouts. I know that sounds a little shallow, but most of the people I knew who had done Scouts had gotten out at 12, and I was starting to feel like I was a little too old for the uniform. Jacob said that he would probably hang it up too, but Nick said he was going to make Eagle before he left. That was the other thing I was conflicted about. Jacob and I were going to the same high school, but Nick's family sent him to a private Christian academy, so Scouts were the only time we really got to see him. He said that he would stay in touch, but I think all 3 of us knew that it would likely be our last summer together. We were all looking forward to the campout in Mineral Hill State Park, and as we rode up there on one of the big yellow buses that Scoutmaster Mark always rented for the trip, we were surrounded by the sounds of laughing, yelling kids who were looking forward to a weekend in the woods. "You bring any snacks?" Jacob asked. The 3 of us squeezed in the back seat. "You know it," I told him, opening my backpack to show him the collection of chips and sodas that I had brought. "Nick, what about you?" Jacob asked. Nick grinned. "Oh, I got snacks, but I brought the good stuff, too." "You mean?" Jacob asked, but Nick shushed him, saying later when he tried to whisper it. Mineral Hill State Park was a place where we had gone for campouts for years. It was a well-maintained park, something they had cultivated back in the 80s when the land had been used as a mine or something, and there were lots of bathrooms and trails and a swimming hole with a rope to swing off. It was a great place, a place that played quite often in my memories, and after that weekend and more than a few of my nightmares. The park had legends of its own, of course. There were open mine shafts on the property, and you had to be careful not to fall into them. There were supposed to be some kind of government testing site there in the 50s, but the facility had since closed. It had something to do with animal testing, but no one was really sure about it. There were ghost stories of spectral miners and noises heard in the woods at night, but they were just stories, tales cooked up for campfire stuff. I'd been coming here for years, and I'd never seen anything weirder than a bear or a couple of possums that got into our tent. The park was safe. That's why our parents weren't afraid to let us go there. Safe as a park could be, they would have said. We got there before lunch and started setting up camp. Some of the kids were working on badges for pitching tents and making fires, so they were working on that as we unpacked the bus and set up cook fires in the first aid tent. All three of us had first aid training, and Nick and I were even CPR certified. We had little doubt that we could tend to the scrapes and boo-boos that this bunch would get. And as we got our three-man tent set up, Jacob asked Nick if he could see what he'd brought. Nick opened his bag and held out the last thing that either of us would have expected. A map. "I'm sure it's a great map and all," Jacob said, clearly less than impressed, "but I thought maybe you would have swiped one or two of your older brother's magazines or something." "Priorities, Jake," Nick said as he rolled his eyes. "I got this from my dad's friend who does survey work. I told him I'm doing a report on the park and how it used to be, and he said he had some old maps. I swiped this one. Hopefully he doesn't miss it, but do you see anything interesting?" I looked over it, Jacob giving it a perfunctory look as he munched potato chips, and thought I saw what Nick was talking about. "You're talking about that," I said, pointing to the square on the map about 2 miles from the campground. Nick smiled. "Yes, indeed," he said with a wicked grin. "That, gentlemen, is the Oroville Site, a government testing facility that was built in the 1920s and closed in 1971. The info on what they did there is a little hazy, but it had something to do with animals and their uses during the Cold War." "And you just, what?" Jacob said. "Wrung all of this out of some poor government official in your off time?" Nick rolled his eyes. "No, stupid, I use the internet. You should try it sometime. Like I said, the info is hazy, but I bet the facility is still there. We should go check it out. I bet it's really cool." "Oh, sure," I said, flopping onto my sleeping bag and grabbing a bag of chips for myself, "'cause Scoutmaster Mark is absolutely going to let the three of us blunder off into the woods in the middle of the night." "Already got that covered," Nick said with a grin as he pulled out his badge book. "There's a badge for spotting indigenous night birds. One of the badges I need to be considered for an Eagle Scout. We're going to go out and spot a few birds, just to cover our tracks. Then we're going to make our way here so we can do a little exploring." "Yeah, that sounds fun and all," Jacob said, "but I think I'll pass." "What, you scared?" Nick asked, clearly trying to goad him a little. "No, but the idea of getting arrested for being caught in a government facility and having to explain to my parents how I got there doesn't sound like a lot of fun." Nick made a rude noise. "This place was abandoned years ago, Jake. Come on. It's our last scout camp out. Let's do something really fun. What do you say?" I shrugged. "I'm in, I guess. It does sound like fun. And if the lights are on, we can always leave the way we came." Jacob rolled his eyes. "Fine, I guess I'll go too. Worst I can get is tetanus or exposed to Agent Orange, I guess." We decided that we'd go Saturday night, just so it didn't look like we were too eager. Nick spotted some birds that night, just to cover our tracks, and we helped the kids roast marshmallows and hot dogs and sing along to Scoutmaster Mark's terrible guitar playing. There was no spooky stories the first night. Ghost stories were always for the second and third night for some reason, and as we settled in for bed, we were all excited about what we might find the next day. The next day was full of hiking and badge work for the kiddos. Bobby got his animal spotting badge. Chris got his first aid badge when Terry slipped and cut his knee, and they all got their badge for hiking more than a mile, if they didn't already have it. We swam in the lake, we pointed out some edible berries, and all in all, we had a good day. I had almost forgotten about the plan until Nick turned to Scoutmaster Mark and reminded him of it over dinner. Scoutmaster Mark seemed hesitant. We were his responsibility, after all, but Nick assured him that we'd be safe. "We'll be back before midnight. Scout's honor," he said, all of us knowing that Scoutmaster Mark would be out cold after 9, and a herd of buffalo wouldn't wake him up until sunrise. So, after getting the little kids settled and saying goodbye to our scoutmaster, the three of us set off into the dark woods. It was 9. The sun had been down for about half an hour, and the night bugs and the evening wildlife were in full swing. We walked through a performance of every mating call and wild cry you can imagine, and when we came to the fork that would usually take us to the swimming hole, Nick took us into the woods instead. "Okay," he said, holding up the map and shining his light on it, "about a mile this way, and we should hit the perimeter." "Look," Jacob said, "if this is a joke or something, go ahead and let me know. There's no way any of this is real. This is a scary story that someone made up to freak out kids. If there was a government facility out there, someone would know. We would have seen it. We've hiked all over this." But Nick stopped as he pointed to something up ahead in the trees. "Explain that then, Jake," Nick said, pointing to a rusty barbed wire fence with "Government property, no trespassing" hung from it. Jacob looked at it like he was seeing a mirage. That could just be an old sign." We all hopped the barbed wire fence and proceeded on, Jacob's protest getting stuck on the barbs, I suppose. The woods were unnaturally quiet out here, the leaves scuttering in the wind, the only sound beyond the distant sound of wildlife. There were no birds out here, no insects, and that should have been our first indication that something was wrong. Scouts had taught us that silence in the forest was abnormal, and if you couldn't hear animals, then they had probably gone somewhere else, and you should too. We were all curious about this place that Nick had found, and as we came out of the woods and found ourselves at the edge of a broken concrete road, it only made us want to find this place more. A half hour later, we saw a security hut, but it was dark and unmanned. The glass was starred, cracks running through it, and the interior was full of dust motes. No one except mice and roaches had been there for years, and we followed the road until we came to a concrete building set into the side of the mountain that rose beside the spring. If you hadn't been looking for it, anyone could have missed the place. It was squat and set into the side of the mountain in such a way as to be nearly undetectable. It was dark, of course, and by the number of abandoned jeeps and trucks in the front, it was pretty clear that no one had been here for a long time. There was no sign to tell us its purpose, only a plaque that read Oroville Site. "The stories say they tested things on animals in there," Nick said. "You think they were making bombs into dogs, or like animals that would attack on command?" "I don't know," I whispered. "And I don't care," Jacob said, a shudder creeping into his voice. "Let's get out of here. This place is spooky." "Aw, come on," Nick said. "It'd be a shame to leave now. We haven't even seen the inside yet." "Nuts to that," Jacob said. "Come on, we found it. We saw it. Now let's go. I got a funny feeling about this place. Something doesn't sit right here." Nick opened his mouth, probably to tell Jacob not to be a baby, when a sound cut through the preternatural silence like nails on glass. Nick looked to the left of the main entrance, now shuttered by a rolling door, and saw a single door with the word maintenance on it. Something was scratching at it, and at the end of each 5 to second scratching session, it would make a weird keening noise, like a dog that wants to be let out. We all stared at it, not quite believing what we were hearing. But when Nick started walking towards it, I begged him not to go. "Sounds like someone's dog stuck in there," Nick said. sounding put out with us. Clearly nothing they were working on is here, so it's probably someone's lost dog. Well, let them worry about that, Jacob said. Please, Nicky, don't open the door. Nick made a dismissive sound and went to look at the door. It was padlocked shut, but a couple of hard slaps with a rock took care of that. Nick opened the door, but no dog was on the other side. He made a clicking noise at it, coaxing it out. And that was when something big and gray jumped on him. It may have once been a dog, but what came out now was all bones and graying skin and piercing red eyes. Jacob and I ran. We couldn't help it. We hadn't been afraid of monsters for about 3 to 4 years now, but when a monster presents itself to you, you remember how easy it is to run. Nick was screaming, his voice cutting through the silence around the facility. And every step away from him was like knives ripping at my skin. He was screaming for help. He was screaming for his father, but I'd heard something else. Something that lived below the scream, like bugs in the underbrush. It was the glittery sound of claws on the pavement. There were more of them. "Climb," I told Jacob, the two of us making for the tree line. We came off the concrete and into the grass, running for the first big gnarled oak we could find. I was the better climber, and I was up the tree in a matter of seconds. Jacob was trying, but he just couldn't get a good grip. He was sliding down as often as he was going up, and I put a hand down to catch hold of him. "Take my hand," I yelled, reaching down to get him. Jacob lunged, and our fingers laced as I started to pull him up. I nearly had him high enough to grab the lowest limb when one of those bone dog things jumped and grabbed his ankle. I tried to hold him, I really did, but his sweaty hand slipped off mine, and when he fell, I heard the pack bury his cries under them. I wanted to help him, but there was nothing I could do. One of those things had gotten Nick. It would tear me to pieces. I held the limb and hid my face, not moving until they finally quieted and stopped savaging Jacob. I glanced down, but he was gone. I looked down, but they were not. There were 6 of them, all of them looking up at me with real interest. Their stubs of tails were wagging like maniac metronomes, and I felt myself shaking as those red eyes stared at me. I thought about climbing higher so maybe they'd forget about me. But if I fell in my fear, then I'd be done for. Instead, I climbed high enough to put my back into a dip in the trunk and got as secure as I could. I don't know how long I sat there, but I must have dozed. I woke up with the midday sun on me and not a skeleton dog to be seen. I looked down hesitantly, not wanting to take any chances, but they were gone. I didn't know if the sun bothered them or if they had gotten bored, but I didn't waste time. I started sprinting for the campsite. I wanted to tell an adult, something I had thought I almost was last night. I wanted to tell them about Nick and Jacob and all those dangerous mutants that would be roaming around now. I needed to tell someone. I needed to tell them before it was too late. It turned out it was already too late. The park rangers and the police were there when I got to the campsite, and they were very happy to see me. Happy wasn't exactly the word. They were curious to know where I had gone, and glad to have a witness. They told me the entire scout troop had been killed. It looked like a pack of wild dogs had gotten them, and parts of them had been scattered everywhere. As far as they knew, I was the only survivor. When I told them about the Oroville Site, one of the cops raised an eyebrow. "You saw it?" he asked, looking at me like he couldn't believe it. And when I told him I had, and what had come out, he walked off to make some phone calls. A helicopter came down as the police were taking me home, and I saw guys with guns and camo hopping out to talk with the police. I read a story not long after about how there had been a dangerous explosion in the park, and it would be closed until further notice while they made the area safe again. That was 30 years ago, back in 1994. I haven't been camping or hiking since. I haven't been anywhere near Mineral Hills since then. I have no intention of ever going back. I can't even sleep with the windows open without having a panic attack. So if you happen to be camping in the vicinity of Mineral Hills, listen for the silence. There may be more than coyotes in those woods.
Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do, and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.